This is a Haag-Streit tower style slit lamp, and sometimes you may have an issue where the slit is not closing all the way. You've turned it down and there's still a little slit. The stage is all the way down, but there still remains a slit. Well, if your stage is going all the way down, then it's possible that your upper push rod needs to be adjusted. So if you wanted to make the slits close a little more, well, there's a place where you can adjust the upper rod by turning it. It's got a little hole, and the upper rod has threads on the top of it, and you can turn it to lengthen it or shorten that upper push rod to make your slits correspond to the lower assembly. So underneath your upper assembly, there's this rod that pushes the slits open and closed. There's a slight hole in the bottom of the rod. If you get something really thin and strong, you can slip it in that hole, and you can adjust it by turning it to the right, which will shorten the rod because it's threaded on the other end, or turn it counterclockwise to make it longer. So if we wanted this slit to close sooner, then we would make the rod shorter so that it would fall down and close the slit. So we would put our little pointer into the hole of the rod and turn it, just maybe half turn, and then see what it does. If it needs to go a little more, turn it one more. And you can see while you're looking through your binoculars when you shorten it or when you lengthen it, because it corresponds with riding on the stage with the other push rod that's pushing the stage up. This is a Haag-Streit tower, and this is the layout of the slit width assembly. When we're turning the crank knob, it's going to be operating our slits. So we're going to open it up, and we're going to take off this end and show you what's going on underneath. We take this knob off. You can see underneath what's going on. As we turn it, it's moving this little piston that's pushing the rod underneath. So that's what's going on underneath. As it retracts, the stage pushes the rod back down on this little bearing that it's riding on, and as we turn it, it pushes the rod up, which corresponds to the upper rod in the aperture diaphragm filter assembly. So that's what's going on down here. I've taken one apart so you can see the actual insides that's going on. I've gutted this so we can see what this part is. See how that's going on there. That's what's going on. As it turns, it's pushing that bearing up. And this we have a piston that's pushing up against that bearing. Pushing up against this bearing. And this piston is pushing the lower rod. Now the lower rod is in here. Call this a pole, and it rides in here. You can't see it. You can only see it up top, but it's inside here. And it fits in here. It goes in here. It's hollow, so it goes through here, and it pushes the stage on this end. So this piston and the lower rod are working together against the crank. Now the push rod, the lower push rod, is pushing up against the bottom of the stage. And it's pushing it up and down. And when the stage is moving up and down, the upper rod is on top, and it's riding on this little path. So you can turn it, and it can still operate the upper rod. And the upper rod is going through the assembly and going to your top hat up here. And that's what's operating the slits. So when we're pushing it, it opens up the slits. When it pushes, it opens it up, and when it goes back down, they close. So that's what's going on. So everything has to be meshing together, running smoothly. Your rod, lower rod, can't be bent. If it's bent, it's not going to be sliding through your pole very well. If your piston's not moving freely inside the pole, then that's going to restrict the movement. So everything has to be moving smoothly. And if you're adjusting it and the stage isn't going down all the way, well, there could be some issues in here. It needs to be cleaned and oiled. If it's sluggish and not going down, gravity pulls it down. If it's not going down all the way, then you may have some issues in here. And your movement in your pole needs to be smooth. If something's not moving, then there could be some things on your rod or on the little piston that's not letting it move freely. So if your slit is not closing, one thing you can do is you can lift up this assembly just a little bit. There's a little bit of play. You can lift it up and watch your slit to see if it closes when you do that. If you notice that it closes when you lift it up, then that at least shows you that your slits will indeed close all the way, which is a good sign. So there's something restricting it from dropping down all the way. It could be your stage issue, or just might, if you know your stage is going all the way down, then it's probably your upper pin needs to be adjusted. See, it's riding on top of this stage, and if there's no lubricant up there, oil, it can slowly begin to start turning your upper rod and getting out of adjustment. So the older models, it's usually the upper rod just needs to be adjusted. Your newer models where the stage can come completely off, it's usually a stage issue, not going down all the way. You can take this upper assembly top hat off by removing the safety screw, and the Haag-Streit you don't have to loosen the plate that holds the detent bearing in, but other models you do. You need to loosen that plate so it doesn't push the bearing in, but the Haag-Streit stays in. You can remove that screw and pull your whole assembly up and examine what's going on. Taking the safety screw out. And because it's a Haag-Streit, I don't need to loosen this plate that holds the detent bearing, so I can lift it up. And this stage is the type that will come completely off. And these are the ones that usually have the issues. Some of them have some bearings inside here, and the newest ones don't even have this little bearing assembly. It's just open in there, and the inside of this can get burred up from going up and down on this post. You would need to sand the inside of that, clean it out real good, and put some rim oil on it and see if it repairs going down all the way. On this one where the bearings can come out, you can take this little bearing set out by loosening the screw, pulling out the bearings, and again sanding the inside of your stage. The travel path, it's brass. Clean that out completely and put your bearings back in and see if that resolves your stage not going down all the way. But the older style where it doesn't come up all the way, those seem to be better. Now when you take your top hat off with the power still on, you can observe what's going on with when your stage is pushing on the pin. But here it's closing all the way, so that's a good sign. That means your slits are closing. So the issue is the length. Something is keeping that from collapsing all the way, releasing all the way, and closing the slits. So it's either the length of the rod or the stage not going down all the way. Sometimes it's even the little piston underneath the long rod. It's restricted and it's holding up, and you would need to address that issue. Now as you're screwing it in or screwing it out, there's only so many threads that you can go in and so many that you can go out. And if you've turned it too many times, it may even restrict this upper rod. So that's always got to be moving freely. So you may have to back off. If you've tightened it too much and it's restricted, then you may have to back it off a little bit so that it once again becomes freely. It may, if this rod is bent a little bit, it may go in and out easier depending on which way you have this positioned. But everything needs to be nice and straight. Once you've made the adjustments and everything is moving freely, then your slits should close all the way, corresponding to what you have your knob set to. So if it's working well, don't forget to put a drop or two of rim oil on top of your stage to make sure that it's moving freely and not turning that rod. On the Haag-Streit, the normal position of your dial is that when it's on 5, your slit should be just about closed. You should barely be able to see your slit. And then by moving it towards 0, it should be completely closed. So if you wanted to set it to factory, right when you're right about 5, you should just barely be able to see it, and then any more movement and it's closed. Now, you have to be careful about turning your rod in that when you have it opened all the way, if you've got it turned too much the other way, then it may not open all the way. It may not open all the way because you have your rod turned too much. So you're going to have to find a balance sometimes between what makes it closed and what makes it open fully. You may have to compromise on one. You may have to compromise on it opening up all the way completely, or just barely spending a little time being closed before it starts opening up again as you turn your dial. You're going to have to figure that out, what's the best balance. As it's closing and you continue turning, it stays closed, and then it starts opening again. And then when you open it all the way, it disappears, and then after you keep turning it, and then it starts to reappear again. So you have to determine what's your best setup. One other note, if you ever remove this angle of inclination, you have to be very careful that you don't turn your assembly more than the outer boundary, because you will bend the rod. So be careful. The rod, this pole is hollow, but it's only got so much space, and it only gives you so much room to turn in here. So if you remove this angle of inclination, if you've lowered it to get your rod out or to work on it, be careful about how much you turn it, because you will bend the rod if you go past the point of no return. Don't do that if you can.